Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Colleagues, good afternoon once again, everyone in the virtual space. Welcome to this Research Edge Forum. Today we have 3 speakers for you. We have our first speakers actually, Dr. Claire Bowen, Dr. Claire Bowen O'Connor, and Dr. Elizabeth Lynch. Dr. Claire Bowen O'Connor is an environmental plant physiologist with 13 years tertiary level teaching experience. Her training encompasses woody plant tissue culture, plant stress physiology, and terrestrial ecology. Her research focus is sustainable agriculture and forest conservation on island landscapes. Dr. Bowen O'Connor is passionate about learning and empowering others to be agents of change. She is currently an assistant professor in biology in the College of Pure and Applied Sciences here at the University of the Bahamas. She will be presenting today along with Dr. Elizabeth Lynch, who is an anthropological archaeologist. Our research uses 3D visualization, morphometric analysis, and Native American narratives to understand how ancient peoples created social spaces that are tethered socio-cultural reproduction of knowledge to ancient canon landscapes on the Southern Plains. She is currently working with Dr. Claire Bowen O'Connor on a NICAR funding project in Grand Bahama. Please join me in welcoming Drs. Bowen O'Connor and Lynch, your first presenters for today, who will be presenting on the topic, Managing Post-Dorian Forest Recovery through Community-Based Engagement. Dr. Bowen O'Connor, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just showing you who I am for those of you who don't know who I am. Hi, but I'm going to take off my video just because I have some bandwidth issues. This afternoon, Dr. Lynch and myself, we're going to present. It's going to be somewhat informal in that we will hand off to each other throughout this presentation. So this work is part of a larger project that was titled the Citizen Science Forest Recovery and Community Perspectives on Post-Hurricane Dorian in Grand Bahama. We received funding in November 2021 and we visited Grand Bahama back in January 2022 to review the forest plots and see just how we were going to be able to tackle it on the ground. We had some idea of the forest plots, but we know that there would have been some challenges, especially in light of the COVID restrictions. Now, because these COVID restrictions were in full effect, the whole team wasn't able to attend. So only part of the team was on the ground, which meant that the work was somewhat limited. But in spite of that delay, we were able to recruit students from both UB main campus and from the University of Wyoming for a month of fieldwork in this summer. Our objective for this project really is to evaluate community perspectives on forest recovery efforts on Grand Bahama, specifically to look at the attitudes towards the renewal of forest resources and to get a better understanding of the perspectives on climate change as it relates to the impacts of high intensity storms. This project was funded by the United States Forest Service, the National Infrastructure for Caribbean Resilience, which is the NICAR grant. and also the University of Wyoming International Research Grants, which assisted us in a lot of our travel throughout this year. So today we're going to talk a bit about the history of our project and where it's headed, using the initial management strategies that we employed to implement the project this year. So we will approach this community-based engagement by considering the 4 areas. We'll look at the location and context, and the images here just trying to orient you as we go along during the project. We're going to look at some training aspects and the methodologies that we employed, the data collection and the tools that we used, and also community engagement, which is written larger here because that's really our focus. So the Bahamian archipelago, which is situated firmly in the hurricane belt, we know is prone to the impact of hurricanes almost annually. And with climate change, or this change in climate that we seem to be seeing, the storm intensity seems to also be increasing. And that therefore makes the Bahamas one of the most vulnerable nations in the world. The island of Grand Bahama, which is the northernmost island of Grand Bahama, is also located east of Florida and west of the island of Grand Abaco. And it was severely impacted by the passage of Dorian in 2019. So the images here show you the basic areas that we wanted to focus on, and the areas highlighted in blue and yellow on the top image are just the forest reserves. That was our primary focus. The image below shows you all of our field sites from the university field station at UB North along Grand Bahama Highway, and our trial sites and the nursery, which we will talk about a little later on. And then we also have these permanent plot sites, which are established by the forestry unit. And that's where we want to actually carry out this community engagement within the next 2 years and have the trees planted out there and be able to monitor them over time. So the project's roots are really in the concerns about recovery of human and environmental systems. So this is where the collaboration between Dr. Lynch and myself started. So after the major storms, sometimes the social impacts are only very immediate, or the people's approach to the social impacts are very immediate. So it's about making sure people have food and shelter, but it doesn't extend much beyond that. And then people sometimes have to wait a very long time to actually get assistance. So one of the things that led to this project was noticing that after the passage of Hurricane Matthew, people were still in a recovery mode. And then Hurricane Dorian hit, and people hadn't even received some of the assistance that they had applied for to really recover from the impact of Hurricane Matthew. So this project is really to look at how people feel about all of these research projects that seem to be very focused on everything but the human aspect, and then asking humans who live in and around the area to come and assist them. So we developed our community-based engagement really to coordinate the efforts of our work and of work that was also funded by the Bahamas Protected Area Fund, because UB was already on the ground and already working with the forestry unit. So we wanted to work with them very closely so that we could really have good discourse. So the field work encompassed 2 contrasting areas, as you can see in the images here. The more western parts of the island, which weren't as damaged by Hurricane Dorian, you see there's still pine trees left. And on the more easterly parts of the island, the pine trees were all destroyed. So the pines are no longer there. However, as we go forward, we'll talk a little bit about some of the regeneration that we have seen on the ground that is happening in areas further out east. So when we talk about community engagement, what do we mean? According to the CDC in 1997, community engagement is the process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated by geographic proximity, special interest, or similar situations to address issues affecting the well-being of those people. It is a powerful vehicle for bringing about environmental and behavioral changes that will improve the health of the community and its members. And it often involves partnerships and coalitions that help to mobilize resources and influence systems, change relationships among partners, and even serve as catalysts for changing policies, programs, and practices. And this project sought to do that indeed. So we initiated several strategies, including citizen science strategies, to encourage visitors and the community members to participate in data collection and in the planting out activities, as well as in the monitoring of the permanent plots and the tagged forest transplants. These citizen science initiatives were aimed at providing the community with some sort of means to directly input, just to have their own direct input into recovery efforts, and also to provide a social impact analysis of the post-Dorian forest recovery efforts, as well as to provide long-term monitoring and maintenance for the resources by the community. So over the long term, so that going forward, we wouldn't have some of the challenges that we had when we started the project in terms of some of the baseline data. We didn't have a lot of that because it simply wasn't available. So when we look at training, we took on several approaches, coming from both the human side and from the environmental side, and trying to marry those together. This gave us an opportunity really to have multidisciplinary training for the students. So the University of Wyoming students were able to get trained in some plant science techniques, and the University of the Bahamas students were able to get trained in some ethnographic techniques. So the fieldwork and training activities essentially occurred in 3 major groups on Grand Bahama. There were 4 UB students who participated in May, from May 16 to May 20th, along with 3 University of Wyoming students who actually arrived on the 19th. And the University of the Bahamas students are the ones who would have led the plant science measurements as part of their coursework activities. During the summer, they were involved in a course called plant taxonomy. And then the University of Wyoming students were able to lead the ethnographic study. So during this first field trip, we all stayed together to build and promote teamwork. And we employed several techniques, including soil analysis, plant analysis, and some of the ethnographic techniques. And we were able to work along with various partners in the community as well, from the Bahamas National Trust to forestry, the forestry unit here in New Providence, who came over with us and also worked alongside us. I'm going to pass it over now to Dr. Lynch to talk about the anthropogenic survey that we were able to employ during the summer as well.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen O'Connor. One of the, just a real quick introduction to ethnographic methods. So one of the biggest tools that we have in our toolkit is the participant observation. And so during the semester or during our field work, my students worked with UB students in order to just show them how we do participant observation, which is, as it sounds, participating in community events, participating in just daily activities, observing what's going on, and then constantly opening up a dialogue. One of the major concerns that was brought to our attention very early on in the study was the presence of a lot of trash dumping areas or material cultural dumping areas across the island, and they occur in many different localities. They have different shapes and sizes, if you would believe it. And one of the things that we thought we would do in the absence of a research permit to actually do a lot of interviewing, was to start from the ground and build up a baseline data set. So we recorded the location and mapped all of the different types of material piles. So in this image, you can see students walking in a transect area, recording the types and approximate amounts of materials in each one of those areas. The goal is then to build a map of these locations across Grand Bahama, and then working with our partners at the Port Authority and DevCo, develop a series of focus groups to better understand the nature of these particular human material culture interfaces. And one of our concerns is how these particular types of scenarios are engaging with the freshwater supply, as well as the different plants that you can see. This is actually right at the edge of a forest. And so we're concerned with how it's interacting with the plant community, how are these types of materials, and as they degrade and are engaging with water supplies, and then how people actually consider and think about these types of spaces. Dr. Bowen O'Connor?
Yes. So we did that alongside the plant survey, which was one of the second training activities, and it occurred both in UB Nassau and at UB North. Dr. Lynch and I worked together with my class of 6 students, 5 females and a male, to train them on photography of plants, 3D capture of the plants as well. And then on our return to Grand Bahama, we were able to work with the students to have them actually go out and collect physiographic information, which means they went out and they collected information on plant growth, plant identification, plant positioning, and so on, so that we could also generate maps on this information. We collected soil samples so that we could have a better idea of the pH in the various sites that we were working in. And we were also able to participate, as I said, with the Bahamas Protected Areas funded projects, where students were actually trained in groundwater sampling as well as soil sampling. So now we're able to monitor and evaluate pH, not just in the soil, but also in the groundwater. Data collection was very varied. We used both sheets that the forestry department would have brought with them, and they would have trained the students on how to use their sheets, but we also used some other quick tools like this scale and something called EpiCollect 5, which is a data collection tool that can be used on your phone, and it does not require the internet. So once you've downloaded the app onto your phone and the project that you intend to use, you're able to continue collecting data, and that data goes into a database, a spreadsheet actually, which you can then download after you've uploaded the data you collected in the field. You can then download that from the internet, and you can use that information for all of your analyses. So students were trained on EpiCollect as well. The final major activity really included the nursery development and the planting out of some pines. So after we did all these measurements, we had to complete the construction of the nursery. So that in itself was another activity. And that was to prepare for the incoming plants that were coming in August. And on the next few slides, as we wrap up here, I'll show you some of the community engagement that occurred with those plants. So we set out to engage both university students and members of the neighboring communities in the form of high schools, residents, some non-governmental organizations, as well as the governmental organizations, like as mentioned by Dr. Lynch earlier, the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the Development Company, as well as the Grand Bahama Utility Company, who showed a very who had a very keen interest in our project, and they have expressed that they want to work with us for the long term. So that is something to really look forward to as we continue working on this project. We also worked with local interest groups, which makes it interesting because citizen science is not at all new to the Bahamas. So trying to get people to now focus more on non-mangrove plants is the only challenge that we would have, because people are already sensitized to working on these kinds of projects. And in the images you see here, these are all members of Earth Care Bahamas, which is focused primarily on bird watching, but they also do some mangrove planting as well. So it was very exciting to have them out of the nursery, helping us to repot plants, repot the pines, plant some of them out in planters, and actually finish the irrigation system, as you see down in the bottom, was that right-hand corner of the screen as well. We were able to recruit people using various means. Word of mouth ended up, word of mouth and our broadcast on the ZNS network in Freeport were the two most effective methods. We prepared a flyer that we had distributed amongst all of the stakeholders, and only a few people signed up. But after we had a member of Earth Care Bahamas actually connected us with ZNS, and ZNS came out to the nursery and had a short interview with us, and that was broadcast on the news network on Tuesday, and I think also on Thursday night, as well as it was posted on their Facebook site, and that got more people to come out. So we had about 20 participants in total, which was really very exciting, including students who came there to get their community service hours. So that was really nice. So that's basically all of the strategies that we employ to try and keep managing this project. And we'll continue with this because this is just the start and we have 2 years. So we have 1 more year in which to complete this project. We intend to continue working with our partners and developing further. I'll pass it over to Dr. Lynch now if she has anything else that she would like to add.
Dr. Bowen O'Connor, I think you've covered pretty much everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
So
thank you both very much, Dr. Bowen O'Connor and Dr. Lynch. We're grateful for your presentation. Are there any questions? Let's check the chat. If there are any questions, you may go ahead and ask your questions.
The only question I have is, can we get a copy of this video, please?
It will be sent, the recordings will be sent to everyone.
Since the initiative has started, do you see more persons being involved
Can you
or
speak a
excited
little
about it?
louder, please?
Sorry, after this initiative would have started, has more persons gained interest in joining?
I would have to say yes, because we started with 2 people. And by the end of the week, we had 17 people. And then we still had some other people who were calling on the telephone. We've also had interest from the BNT, which is the Bahamas National Trust Kids Group. Their kids club wants to partner with us to going forward to actually go out and be planting out the pines in various areas. Because as I said earlier, people have really been only focusing or focus mostly on the mangroves and the coastal areas, which are important for protection against storms. So don't get me wrong, they're critically important. But me being a terrestrial plant scientist, it's also important that we protect our land species as well and reforest the area for improvement. So yes, we are getting some increased interest, and we hope to keep expanding that as we continue to increase our presence there in Grand Bahama. Yes.
Excellent. Are there any further questions?
Good day.
Mm-hmm.
Good day. My name is Cassidy Capron. I'm a student at the UB North. I have two questions. First, I wanted to know is where can we find the methods that you all used and your results when you're done in a year's time?
Well, that would be in various places. Do you want to take the lead on that, Dr. Lynch?
Yeah, I can. In terms of our data, most of the data will be housed with Dr. Bethel at the University of Bahamas North. We are working on at least 2 peer-reviewed presentations over this next year, and then we're hoping to have at least 1 group publication from all the scientists that have been working with us in the field. So it will be across the soil sciences, the ethnographic work, plant sciences, and hydrology. So we're hoping that will be out within the next 6 months to 1 year. Until then, if you're interested more in our methods and our results right now, I think the best thing to do would be to talk to Dr. Bowen O'Connor, and then we'll see what's available in terms of interim sharing kinds of capacities.
Am I hearing that the data will be resident in the library at the University of the Bahamas? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not 100% sure where Dr. Bethel will have it stored, but it will be, Dr. Bowen O'Connor, do you know?
Well, 100% we're not certain exactly where it will be housed just yet, but the aim is to have it stored at the university. And we do want to publish in the local, our school journal, was at the International Journal of Bahamian Studies as well.
Yes.
Because we think it's important to build up our local journal, because as we found out at the very start, when our students were searching and so on, people came to our journal searching for Bahamian information, and it didn't have what they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to ensure that we contribute to that so that we can build that repository of information going forward.
Yes, I agree. That is indeed an imperative, because over the years, the research has been done on various areas within the country. However, the data goes with those who come from externally to collaborate with us. And so it's important that that information is also resident in the library of the University of the Bahamas.
Certainly.
Yeah, the University of the Bahamas has predominant control over all the information. Like, I would say 95%, if not 100% control. Wouldn't that be correct, Dr. Bowen O'Connor?
Yes, not Dr. Bahamas yet.
I know.
Certainly. Yes, that is definitely the aim, because we had difficulty finding the initial, the baseline information. So we don't want researchers going forward to have that kind of issue again. We really need to ensure that we have that repository being built locally.
And the publications, I think that's also critical.
Yes. Dr. Lynch, there's a question in the chat for you.
Question in the chat. Dr. Lynch, you mentioned that some areas in the forest had garbage, and you also brought up points that it can affect the island's water system. That is correct. Do you think further research should be done to test this?
I do think so. I'm actually working with Dr. Bowen O'Connor and 3 other hydrologists who were out in the field with us to expand that particular project. So right now we're just in the initial stages of mapping the sites, but I think that we should, okay, Dr. Bowen O'Connor, I might be going out on the limb here, but I think that given the amount of data that we're collecting right now, we ought to be able to posit some hypotheses and test those hypotheses with the various different data points that we're gathering now, like soils, water samples, and plants. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So we definitely should be doing more research. And it's not just what I think, but it's also, I think, where the major stakeholders are all moving as well.
Thank you. Doctors Bowen O'Connor and Lynch, thank you both very much for your presentation. Certainly all of us are better informed than when we came into this virtual space. Thank you both very, very much. Our
And-
next speaker today. Our next speaker today is Dr. Jesus Mesa Morales. He was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and is nationalized in both Australia and Spain. He has been traveling globally in the last 2 decades to accumulate experiences as a Spanish teacher and has worked at universities in Australia, Bulgaria, Poland, Iran, Latvia, Spain, etc. He has 3 master's degrees in the fields of philosophy, linguistics, applied international studies, and a doctorate in Spanish from the University of Salamanca. He is currently pursuing 2 postdoctorates in philosophy of education and in the social sciences. Additionally, he is pursuing a postgraduate diploma in grammar teaching, which will be completed between spring and summer of 2023. Dr. Morales will be speaking to us today on the introduction to the teacher's opinion and attitudes towards teaching and learning Spanish in the Bahamas. Dr. Mesa Morales.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just need the permission to share my screen.
It will be given to you. You are the co-host. You may go ahead.
Thank you. No, it's not available yet. Okay, let me try again.
Try it again first, please.
Okay, done.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon again. And yes, actually the word that I'm coming today to present is introduction to the teacher opinion and attitude toward teaching and learning Spanish in the Bahamas. As you said, I have been working as an assistant professor of Spanish in the University of the Bahamas from the last year. And my intention basically was to understand a little bit more about what is happening with the Spanish teaching and the Spanish learning in the country. No? So basically the objective that I have assumed to do this first introduction, I need to highlight this because I don't have still conclusion, total conclusion. This is just a first approach that I do to the subject. But the objective that I have initially assumed is carry out the initial diagnostic on the situation of the Spanish teachers in the Bahamas. The idea is to know more in depth and with a scientific basis, the current status of teaching Spanish in this country. The second objective that I consider is to know a little bit more about the profile of the teachers in the schools, primary and secondary schools in the Bahamas, no, at university level, to know their opinion, their attitude toward the class, their training, their experience and perception when they teach, and more information about this topic. No? And somehow also I pretend to create a positive impact with this result in order to motivate new studies and to foster somehow the creation of a research line into the Spanish languages in the Bahamas. Why? Because as you know, the name of Bahamas come actually from Bahamar, that is the way how the antique Spanish people who arrived to America with Christopher Columbus in the 1492, they refer to describe this low tide and the shadow sea with deep, the small deep, you know, the water without too much deep. So also the location of the Bahamas is surrounded by important Spanish-speaking countries. And I personally consider that we should have a better approach to the foreigner language Bahamas, and basically because the Bahamas depends of the tourism, and also because it could be important for the international relation with the neighbor around the country's neighbor around the Bahamas. So I did some contextualization, but I will skip because I'm talking in Bahamas, but basically it's about the situation of the education in the country. But I want to focus in the methodology that I did to carry out this work. I need to highlight that this is a work in process. I started last year and I expect to finish when my contract, my first contract of 3 years finish as well. I pretend to keep researching about this topic. But basically this.
Say what?
So.
You could understand him, I can't.
Are you talking with me? Well, I continue. So I started to do this work on the fall 2021. And I also prepare a survey to the Spanish teacher in the primary and secondary schools that was sent by email after getting contact from the Ministry of Education and the private school organization. So I prepare a questionnaire that consists of 40 questions and 28 closed questions and 11 open questions. And then I ask to them to send to the teachers, because for the privacy was not possible to get access to their email at this first stage. No? So I prepared this questionnaire in the Google questionnaire forms, and basically was sent during April and May of this year. So the universe that the information, the data is not complete at all. So it's quite hard to know how many teachers we have in the Bahamas nowadays, but basically an approximate information is between 160 and 180 teachers in the private and the public schools. Basically, the information that I could confirm for this study is that there are 98 teachers of Spanish in the public schools. So that's why the numbers are not are approximated. So the sample that I was able to access was 24 teachers, and basically the information that I got from these 24 teachers was the following. So 92% of them were female, while 8 was just male. The age is distributed in this graphic that you can see. 33% of the teachers that I interviewed was between 18 years and 28 years old. 17% between 29 and 39, 21% between 50, and 25% between 51 and 61. I got also another 4 more older, 62, between 62 and 72 years old. The native language of these teachers was basically English, with 67% of them, and the nationality is predominant, the Bahamian nationality. So somehow, anyway, there are 21% of the teachers that I could interview was Cuban, 9 Peruvian, 4 Guatemalan, and 4 Jamaicans. When I ask them how many countries they have visited in their life, I found that 40% of them have never been in a Spanish speaker country. 38% have only visited one country, 33% 2 countries, 3% 10 countries, and 4% 4 countries. And for me, it's somehow an indicator of the information, of the knowledge that you have about the Spanish speaking community. As you know, Spanish language original from Spain, but then they spread in South American countries, Latin American countries. So it's quite important, according to my perception of the teaching and the development of the Spanish language worldwide, with the global Spanish language, it's quite important to understand the linguistic variation of the Spanish in different countries. Basically, Mexico is the most populated Spanish-speaking country in the world, with more than 120 million of Spanish speakers. And for me, for the interest of this research, it's quite significant to understand their perspective and their knowledge about the other countries. When I ask how long they spend in these countries, 65% has not spent more than 6 months. So basically, only 35% of the people who have visited other countries has spent more than 6 months over there. So when I ask about their preparation, their degree, the highest degree that they had is bachelor degree, 77%, 8% certificate, 4% high school degree, and 21% masters. When you cross this information of the highest degree with the nationality, we found that the people who has more preparation, considering that the master is more, somehow indicates more preparation than a bachelor, and also a bachelor more than the certification. So it's interesting that 80% of them has a master, and these people were from Cuba. And the 20% that have a master of as a highest degree were from Jamaica. Basically, the people from Bahamas has a base, lowers the degree of preparation. So that indicates, in spite of, I don't want to, I need to highlight that this is not a conclusion, but somehow this indicates that we need to foster more studies and more preparation to improve the quality of the teacher in the Bahamas. Talking about how many years they have been teaching in the Bahamas, basically 45% of them have been teaching for between 4 and 8 years, while the 25% of the people who have also interviewed was more than 15, between 15 and 20. Here you have the distribution of the data. No? In spite of, I tried to get information from all the islands, I could basically got information from New Providence, from Nassau, which with the 50% of them teach in Nassau, here in the island of New Providence. Anyway, I was able to get access from teachers from Grand Bahamas, from Andros, from Eleuthera and Exuma as well, and the North Andros too. The distribution of the teacher, the profile of the teacher, the school, the institution where they teach, I was able to get access to 67% of these 24 teachers were teachers from the public schools, while 33 only from the private ones. The year of experience that they have teaching Spanish is basically between 4 and 7 years with 37%. Less than 3 years, 25%, and between 14 and 19 years, 17%. Also, the grade that they teach, what level they teach when they teach Spanish, this information was quite balanced, with the 42% of them were teaching at elementary schools, 29% in the middle school, and also 29% in the high school. The time that they spend teaching during the week, I need 202 hours per week. 46% of them teach between 1 and 2 hours per week, while 21% and 21% also even less than 1 hour, or between 3 and 4 hours. When you cross this information of hour per week and the kind of schools, you find that the public schools basically teach more between 1 and 2 years, 2 hours, while the private school apparently dedicate more time to the teaching. That could indicate also that the quality of the education of Spanish in the private school could be a little bit better than the public one. But this is not, I insist, this is not a conclusive position. No, this is just a first introduction. When I ask them if how many % of the target language they use in the classroom, 63% of them respond that they use between 40 and 60%. That means that they use the English to control the class, to provide information about what they have to, instruction about what they have to do, but basically about 50% of the time they speak Spanish. When you cross this information with the schools, it's quite interesting that these people who respond 60%, 63% are quite equal between private and public schools. So basically, the people who spend more time teaching only in Spanish apparently is focused in the private school, while the people who speak only in English or less than in Spanish is basically in the public schools. Regards the performance as a Spanish teacher and the use of the material, I found that 92% of them normally use the book as a guide, but they adapt the material to the need of the group. And when you cross this information between private and public schools, you find that the private school, 100% of them are focused on adapting the book to the situation of the class. Some people from the public school just follow the book, or also some people from teachers from the public schools, they present the content, but they consider that their class is free and they don't follow the book. When I talk about what about the institution, the support of the institution, the school toward the Spanish, the teaching in Spanish, I asked, in the institution where I teach, is there an unified and shared criterion of what and how I should be taught effectively? This information, these results are not conclusive, but it's quite important to highlight that 50% of them are agree with this position. But I want to highlight that there are people who is strongly disagree in 0.25% and strongly agree in 12.5%. Some people also think that it's neutral. They have a neutral position, but yeah, it's okay. Also, when I was talking about how would you describe the professional quality of the Spanish teacher in the Bahamas, the people say that it's fit enough, basically, in the private school and the public schools. So in the public schools, some people think that it's very competent. They are quite proud of the quality of the teaching of Spanish in the public school, while in the private ones, they don't think this could be, they need to improve it. In another question that the questionnaire includes, do you think that in general Spanish students in the Bahamas are bad, regular, good, or excellent? So the general perspective that I perceive is that the student, the teacher considers that the students are regular. They are not excellent, but basically they are regular or good, while only the public ones consider them as bad. Talking about the model of language that you should use, remember that I highlighted the fact that there is an importance to know the different approaches, the different variation of the linguistic variation of the Spanish. 60%, 63% of the public school teachers respond that the model of the language that they should teach should be an pan-Hispanic model, an international or a hybrid linguistic variety. While 18.5% of them consider that Mexican, Cuban, or Colombian linguistic variation should be the way how they should be the model what they have to teach. And also, which expression best fits for you when I'm talking about if the native Spanish teachers are the best or not? So they consider in the private school that 50% of them consider that native Spanish speakers teachers are better than the non-native Spanish, non-native teachers. While in the public school, this situation is not as agreed. So 69% of them consider that the teacher who speak their own language are better teachers. Something that I support, by the way, personally. So do you think it's necessary to increase the number of Bahamian teachers? The number of the Spanish Bahamian teachers? I strongly disagree in the private school, while absolutely disagree in 37.5% in the public school. Do you think teaching other subjects in Spanish should improve student learning? Some of them, 62% of them responded yes, maybe 50, 43, 44, maybe in the public school, and not sure, 25% in the private one. So I know that I have only 5 minutes more, but I want to also show, just to finish, that this is the kind of information that I have organized, and also there are open questions. In the questionnaire, there are open questions that I was not able to create a graphic to show them, but are quite significant. For example, the name of the specific study that they carry out to teach Spanish. As you can see, there is not a specific one. It's quite different. The different degrees. Also, the methodology that they use to give the classes. It's important to consider that the communicative approach is quite significant. There are a lot of communicative approaches, but it's also, there are not a specific way to teach, no? When I were asked about what is the difference in terms of quality of the Spanish education they receive in public and private studies centers, it's also interesting to read one by one these answers because are quite significant to understand a better situation of the teaching Spanish in the Bahamas. And yes, that's it. Basically, the information that I have been working about. And also, just to highlight the conclusions, it's not real conclusion, but more than observation. I need to highlight that there is not a definitive conclusion in this, because this is a work that I expect to carry out in the future. I also recommend to carry out this study throughout the country to improve the diagnostic and even include also the opinion of the students. But there is a ethics situation that we need to control also. So the result that I have found until the moment right now suggests that the Spanish in the Bahamas shows signs of acceptance and growth. There is a difference perceived between the language education and the teacher in private and public schools. I also advise to establish a comprehensive review of the teaching of foreign languages in the education systems and their impact in the economy of the country. There is also need to truly access to the ethical attitude and belief of learning and teaching Spanish language as a second language in the Bahamas. And I also recommend to establish training courses for training teachers in Spanish. It should be foster language teaching, must focus on promoting a real intercultural skills in the use of the language. With this, I conclude. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for my strong accent, but I did what I could in the best way. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you very
Dr.
much.
Morales. Are there any questions?
Please, if there is any question, I appreciate if you can write it because it's better for me to understand written by spoken.
Dr. Massa Morales, there are no questions in the chat. And no voices are rising. We thank you very, very much for your presentation. And thank you all for being here. We invite everyone to have a beautiful weekend and please listen out for future Research Edge forums. Thank you all so very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.